Harmonics team out to make your welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Just before the recording started, Brian posed a very interesting question. So, Brian, once again, please.
Yeah, I was thinking of the work that Tim does, and the comment that was made last time that people don't know what they don't know, and I was thinking, okay, tension is situational, but what's the tension management perspective for cultural differences? What's the tension management perspective for gender differences? Like I'm watching, enjoying this Little League baseball.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the cultural differences in response to, this upheaval when these are 10, 12-year-old boys, and there's actually 4 girls playing.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the cultural differences of the team and how they respond to crises of being down. The Hawaii team, literally took like the names off their shirt and they put we greater than me. That's what they want to be known for. And that's how they play. Like they're killing teams, like a professional team. They're beating teams like 13-2.
Wow.
So I said, man, this is interesting. But then you hear the girls' perspective. They're playing baseball, not softball. These are 4 girls playing
hardball
baseball.
Yeah.
And they're there and they hit, they pitch, they do all of it. So I said, there's a tension management perspective to all of these.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting to, and then Tim, I'll throw it to you, that I think that it's interesting to look at it at a cultural level, but I think in order to do that effectively, we have to kind of look at it more at the subcultural level, because certainly each person who's playing Little League worldwide, it could be from any variety of different cultures, but there is a culture associated with Little League or the Girl Scouts or you name the group, the Baptist church or whatever it is. You're going to find countless subcultures. And so I do think there's a kind of a way to describe that, each of those subcultures from a tension management perspective. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's so situational. How many different subcultures does each and every one of us belong to simultaneously?
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead. So Tim, I'll throw it your way.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's one that I'm always thinking about as I look at the grid and as we engage in our conversations. But it is always an experience where the tension is high, because you not only have the individual differences, but then you have those differences butt up against the organizational values. And oftentimes they don't match up. So it's almost like two separate challenges that you're faced with. How do we get, and oftentimes what we see is that folks, in an attempt to get away from the tension of it, they try and go to sameness. Well, the difficulty there is the question then becomes, well, whose value system do we adopt?
Right.
And somebody's got to give up something, and folks are resisting giving up their value system to accept what they might feel is another group's value system. So yes, it gets very complicated, and while that's going on, you're still trying to get folks, with the example that Brian just gave around the baseball team, is to get people to rally around a common belief and value that is not always an easy path.
Interesting. So the personal, like if like for a business setting, the personal culture, organizational culture, trying to come together, the common ground, and trying to find a fit. Do you think there's some assimilation or some what's the word I'm trying to use? I'm trying to think of like the cultures that I lived in. I had to adopt somewhat, but I didn't try to adopt fully, but I did try to understand, and that helped me to get on there. But I didn't lose a sense of myself, but I always feel like too that all of those cultures are a part of me. So I have difficulty with identifying just one
Right.
because they did become a part of me.
Yeah,
If
Kathy,
I can, if I can talk to this, because I coach, people from different countries here in business, and there is a process of actual value integration that we use, and it is very complex, as Tim was saying. I mean, it's very complex. You're talking about multiple cultures, family cultures, individual values, family values, organizational values, country values. Then you have societal, sort of global, generational values, that we all deal with. What the process that people struggle with is when values are different from their own, people go through a process of first, being confused and then often rejecting those new concepts because they want to stay with what's comfortable, with what's familiar, and have the dissonance. And it's very difficult to manage that dissonance. And over time, as they find themselves continuously having to deal with those different values, and they move to, a kind of acceptance to some degree, and then saying, well, gee, it's really not as different as I thought it was, as I thought things are from how I feel. And then there's this sense of often people go into culture shock, and say, oh my God, this is way too difficult for me to integrate. I can't handle this. Over time, as people work it through, and this is why it's such a long process for people, and I think this occurs at a micro level, in our society, as well as for people crossing national cultures, then they go to a point of adapting, as Brian was talking about, but that's not really the ultimate cross-cultural. Ultimately, cross-cultural values, to be successful and to work, is to integrate, is to get to a point of integration where you can accept who you are and suss out where you are ultimately, who you are ultimately in your value system, and what the world around you is, and be able to find a way to navigate that rather than to take on other people's values. And I think that that's the confusion that people have, particularly about immigrants to the United States or immigrants elsewhere, is if people don't take on our values, and there's something wrong, and that's not the case. People need to be able to sort out this very complex and difficult process of identifying what is really core to me, and core to the things that I really care about, and then what do I want to accept in the world around me. And I think that's why it's, in many ways hard for kids, but kids are also more malleable, so I'm not offering a solution to that. I'm just talking about the complexity that's there, and that people do, as Brian knows, coming from different cultures, coming to, and always working in different cultural setting, that it is a lifelong process of sussing out those different values, and constantly asking yourself, who am I really, and where do I want to be in that situation?
And Kathy, I think that's very well said, and that's why we have a lot of conversation in the work that I do around identity, and that conversation gets very uncomfortable. It gets very difficult. And yes, people talk about the process of assimilation. When we talk about talent management and talent acquisition, and that whole process as it relates to bias, and we have people. I had a guy in the class once say that he and his wife intentionally did not give their children ethnic sounding names, so that their children would not deal with some of the struggles that he and his wife dealt with in their development. So that idea of assimilation gets very, very questionable and very difficult. And sometimes it's hard for folks to have that conversation and for others to hear that conversation and hear people's struggles and understanding what they give up. I did a session with a client in Texas, and one of the questions in the exercise was, how many people in the room self-identify as a Christian? And everyone in the room said yes to that question. And we processed that along with the other questions, and we went on break. And this was a large group of about 40, 45 folks. When we went on break, one of the guys came over to me and he said, "Hey, Tim, you have a moment?" I said, "Sure." He said, "That was an interesting exercise. You remember the question you asked about identifying as a Christian?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "If you remember, everybody in the room said yes." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm not a Christian." And he said, "The only reason I did it is because, let's face it, we're in the Bible Belt." And he said, "And I did not want to, be judged by my colleagues because I'm not Christian." And so what we often don't recognize is how much people cover up a part of their identity just so that they can assimilate, so that they can be a part of an environment. And the struggles that go through emotionally and psychologically around that process is very, very difficult.
It is very difficult. I can speak to that just from my own parents. My mother was Italian, the only child born in the U.S. of her family, and she was named Micheline, which is a beautiful name, and she refused to use that name, her entire life, and became Margaret, which was acceptable in the U.S. because at that time, you're talking about the early 1900s, 20s, 30s, et cetera, of a time when immigrants were frowned upon, particular immigrants were frowned upon. You see it with Chinese people in the United States who call themselves American names,
yes,
because the Chinese name is so difficult for so many people to assimilate. And so we do it all the time. And as much as we want to call ourselves, an open society, we human beings just exclude others, and it is the nature of that. And I think that's, Tim, I've done succession planning and talent management too in businesses, and I know what you're doing is really great work, and it's really important to have those real conversations in the business setting so that people can get through this and create cultures that can make sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was wondering in what way this Likert model can help uncover, because it seemed like it uncovers some of these behavioral things. The thing that I was writing about in my journal was how, when you talk about culture and some of the behavioral aspects that we were exploring through the Likert model here,
yes,
I'm reminded of the iceberg, where 90% of its mass is underneath the surface. And we only see what we see, right? But we're not really dealing with the core stuff. And that's what it seems like to me as I was writing in my journal, what the Likert model can perhaps help unfold some of that beneath the surface stuff, if people are willing to do it, of course.
Very interesting. I've been writing some notes down that I'd like to kind of rewind a little bit and share, and then love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Now, everything that I'm going to share with you is stuff that I learned when I was a volunteer in high school for an organization that was trying to help a population assimilate in the Metro Detroit area. And it ended up being a very successful thing, but it was basically when there were, I want to say, a lot of Chaldean refugees that were coming. And so I was in high school and we were learning how to do all this. And anyway, it's where I learned common ground and all that. So here's what I remember being taught about culture. Like, culture arises two ways: either organic to such a degree that no one even actively knows that it's happening, but if you're around a certain area long enough or around people long enough, there's kind of like an organic creation of some cultural foundations and all that. But most of the cultures that we encounter are constructed. Someone had some deliberate intention and they're trying to create some sort of new family, new movement, new whatever, new culture. And so I thought that was interesting because I remember the very first thing that all of us were told when we were talking about culture is that we all must recognize that we are each multicultural, that inside of us, we are not a member of just one culture. We are a member of countless cultures that we are conscious of, and who knows how many that we're unconscious of. And from all this, we have to recognize that that's where our uniqueness comes from, our unique combination of those cultural affiliations is what's ended up making each of us who we are. So the real problem comes up when someone's trying to, I want to say, advance a new culture, a new deliberate culture, like a company, or like a new movement, or like a whatever. Because as people are brought into that, they each are bringing with them, their unique combination of cultural affiliations. And when those discussions start to begin and people start to learn a little bit about one another, we were told that the question mark is, does whoever is running this company or this movement or this whatever, do they want us to integrate? Do they want us to abbreviate? Or do they want us to assimilate? What do they really want us to do? Many people talk about creating and developing a corporate culture, but if they speak their personal truth, all they really want is for someone to assimilate to their sets of beliefs and values and practices. I know I'm babbling, but that's where I am. And so I think you can easily explain all that by looking at the change grid, and surprise of all surprises, the screen is the layer I'd want to take a look at. But before we get into that, did anyone have any thoughts about what I've been yammering about for the past couple minutes?
I thought that was very well put, T. I think, I think that those are the notion of organic, which is emergent over time and constructed. And because we're dealing with that in business all the time, it's called invent a culture, roll out a culture, create. And I've been in that business for a long time, and I don't find it very worthwhile. You can't force a culture on people very easily. And but anyway, but I think the way you described it, I think was very nicely put.
Thank you. Because I've always wondered, when does something actually become a culture? I mean, they can say they want to create one. Well, when do they know they've created it? I mean, I think ultimately culture requires time in order to do that. So you can do some things to try to influence it, but ultimately you got a lot of people with a lot of their own multicultural realities that are got to sort it all out. And again, do the people in charge want me to integrate? Do they want me to abbreviate? They don't want me to be a whole, genuine, authentic person. They just want bits and pieces of me? Or do they want me to just assimilate to what they want to do?
The only way you can measure it in a corporate setting, I think, because we've thought about this at length, as you can imagine, is through behavior. When you have the majority of people, you certainly never have the whole, but when you have the majority of people behaving a certain way, and espoused for a certain reason, then you can talk about culture change, but that takes years.
Yeah. And even when, we go like, well, I can see in their behaviors that they've changed this. Did they change their behavior as a result of integration, abbreviation, assimilation? Did they come to it willingly? Was this a growth, a kind of an aha sort of a thing, or are they just complying with whatever's going on? And if people are just complying, I don't know that they really have embraced the culture. So
yeah, I agree, because a lot of it is done through rewards.
Exactly.
Measures and rewards, which is a compliance model.
Yep. So going back to Brian's initial question about how does tension management kind of overlay on this, I do think, luck of all luck, this is the layer I would talk about. If someone is trying to create let's just set aside organic culture altogether, because those are certainly going to be very big players in the what do we say, the drama of evolving a culture. So these things that are just so much a part of you, you don't even know how they became a part of you. That stuff is going to rule the day. But inside of you, there's a lot of other little cultures that you've kind of picked up along the way, you know, things that the way you like to do things, or whatever the case may be. So I promise you that if you move into an over 55 communities, you are going to find a unique culture here that is very perplexing at first. And then at a certain point in time, you begin to just understand it, embrace it. Nah, I don't know if you live it or not, but you know, you just, it is what it is. So, yeah, anyway, people are grumbly. Anywho, so I want to just bring up that someone had to initiate this thought about changing the culture or creating a new culture or whatever. Well, who among these 8 roles is likely to be the ones that are initiating things?
The leader.
The leader, for sure. Who else?
Influencer.
The influencer?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any of the energizer, clearly, but there's also the thinker.
Yeah. And see, I kind of go like, well, where did the leader get the idea about what to be leading? I wonder if there was something that they picked up or they were informed of, because thinkers who are content to just do the thinking may very well have been exposed to an advocator who says, well, those thoughts are really great. That changes things. We could do something around that. Something needs to be done. Oh, leader, you know, grab it by the horn. And then the leader goes, I need people to help spread the message. I need influencers to win people over to our way of thinking. And sometimes the influencers what do I want to say? They don't necessarily always have to influence people. Sometimes the situation awakens stress of one variety or another in a related segment of the population who ends up joining forces, but their motivations are a bit different. Huh, isn't that yeah, process that. So, yeah, but anyway, I do think it probably starts down-grid, and then the leader sees an opportunity and they enlist the help of influencers.
Well, it's kind of like ideology. I apologize. I just want to throw this 2 cents. It's kind of like having an ideology, you know, developing that ideology and then creating the marketing around it.
There you go. Welcome to church. So,
you know what, I got to share something because it really fits in here. I was at a diversity council meeting, a luncheon. It was a full day seminar. Anyway, it was on diversity and it was a women's conference. And the person that did the invocation apologized later because she said, in Jesus Christ's name, we pray, whatever. And I just found it so ironical that we are at a diversity council meeting with 200 people and she's praying only to Jesus Christ. I just found it interesting.
Interesting. And I
was
struck by something parallel to that, and that is that she felt as though she had to apologize for one of the things that makes her her. In a diversity space, which should really be a space where I am safe being different.
Wow, that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, because otherwise I'm being asked to abbreviate that I'm only parts of me are allowed if I want to be part of this culture, I have to put aside other things that are part of the authentic me.
But in a situation like that, don't you think that was a big oversight? I would look at
actually, I think it depends on how the person who empowered this individual to do the invocation framed that request. If they had said to the person, we do have multicultural, multi-religious, multi-faith sorts of groups, And so let's just do something that is more of a spiritual invocation rather than a religious or prayer, or whatever. I don't need to do that. I just need to say, let's all take a moment to bring our spirits together today to support us all in doing whatever it is. I don't need to label it. Well, if someone's informed of doing that, it's great. On the other hand, if they've been saying, so Pastor so-and-so, we would love for you to give the invocation. Well, Pastor so-and-so is probably likely to do what comes natural to Pastor so-and-so, right? Well, did he commit a faux pas at a diversity event? Or did he really just say, this is me, and I'm here to learn as much about everyone else as they are. I'm willing to share this part of who I am. So anyway, I think it all depends on how the assignment was framed. So Tim, you've been agreeing with me. You want to comment on that?
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely ownership on the person that extended the invitation to do the prayer.
Yeah.
And so, but this is again a part of the complexity of this conversation on diversity, which has moved deeply into talking about, well, what does inclusion look like? It's one thing to talk about diversity from the lens of representation, but when you start talking about inclusion and allowing people to bring themselves wholly to the environment, what does that look like and how does it impact the environment?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So,
AT. So just to put something out there, and something I'm thinking about as this conversation is going on, is the cost that one pays, right? Because just like this lady said, in Jesus' name, how it's interpreted based on the culture. If the dominant culture is like, that's a faux pas, then will she be invited back to speak, or how will she be viewed inside of the organization? Because in my experience, personally, I feel that when you make the decision to become an advocate or you stand up for yourself, there's a cost, right?
Yeah.
And calculating that cost ahead of time is something you have to decide when you stand firm and you say what you believe and what's true to you, which should be accepted. But how is it going to be interpreted based on the culture?
Right. When do you introduce these differences? Do you need to do it at hello? I think you're absolutely right. But see, to me, again, it gets back to this thought, and I think this applies to all relationships, is that how often do we meet or even care to meet the whole person? How often do we kind of know, as I go to this dinner party, I need to abbreviate things that might be essential to me in other areas? So if I've got a whole bunch of people that are together and all day long, they have to stay so focused on, what should I be abbreviating? I need to hold that back. I don't need to discover that. I don't know that something good is happening.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that, we are promoting diversity and inclusion. A good portion of our culture is promoting diversity and inclusion in a very punishing culture. So we're constantly, we want to express ourselves and want to feel open and be who we are, which is part of us as being said and told that, yes, this is what we must do. And I think this is part of the spiral dynamics concept, where, the old versus the new is just, really struggling with one another. And yet we have this very punishing culture that is trying to keep people in boxes and keep people from expressing. And so that's where I think we're in a particularly difficult kind of nexus right now of shift and change that is painful, no matter which way you cut it. Because if you choose to align with the group, then you're cutting off part of yourself. And then if you express yourself, you may be alienating and choosing, as someone was saying, to disenfranchise, other people in the group. And it requires a tremendous amount of strength to be yourself, to not only to figure out who you are, which is one problem, one issue, not problem, but,
Right,
but
yeah, well.
challenge. But then also express it and carry forward with that. And I think that is the dilemma facing us in our culture, right? At least in the US, in our culture right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's a punishing culture and a cancel culture,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
the threat, that looming threat, and that's so well said, Kathy. Thank you for offering punishing culture. I mean, I had to write that down. You know, just in terms of the way the cancel culture is operating, you know, calculating that risk of just showing up, like the world is telling you, just show up and be who you are. It's okay. But then when you do, right, just like T said about the timing and the environment and the culture, are you willing to pay that price or cost just to express who you are? Can you afford that price rather?
Right. And unfortunately, all of that abbreviation that associating with a new culture may seem to require at least is an act of dishonesty. It's calculated. You're being dishonest on purpose because you're not being forthcoming, or maybe the first opportunity that someone gives you to announce something about yourself, you know, you might bring it up. I'll give you an example of this. I'm an atheist. So when you go about, I mean, I understand religion and I know that it has certain value to certain people and that's all fine. But personally, it seems far more complex than anything really needs to be. So when do I feel safe saying to other people that I'm an atheist? You know, or let's say I'm invited to people's home for dinner and they decide to say a blessing. Well, I'm not going to say anything disruptive, but just the fact that I'm sitting there quietly, I would hope they would view as being respectful, but they may think that, oh, he's something else. Do you know what I mean? It's like it puts you in a really weird thing, because if you don't take advantage of the first opportunity to speak your truth, then if you speak it later on, they start to wonder, why didn't you say this before? So, you know, now you've been fake, you haven't been whatever. And it's a very weird thing. So abbreviation is generally a conscious decision to be dishonest. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. I mean, that's it. You have to sacrifice some part of yourself if you want to quote unquote fit in some way, or how you perceive people will perceive you.
Right. In which case, are you really fitting in? What you're fitting in with is something that compels you to abbreviate some part of your personal truth. So are you really part of that group?
Well,
No, not at all. Not at all.
and that's where, you know, the organizational culture part of it, you know, begins to make it even more difficult. And Kathy, if you would just say approved, I'm going to certainly incorporate punishing culture in my DE&I work. So,
oh my God, I'm gonna file a lawsuit about that.
Maybe
I am the only person in the world who could have thought of that.
So maybe 6 months from now, Kathy, if someone says, I was at this conference and I heard this guy use this term, punishing culture, just smile.
And I'd raise my hand and I'd say, that was Tim White stealing my concept.
But to that point, and I think this is a great illustration of that punishing culture idea. A colleague of mine, African-American female, was delivering a DE&I session, and she gave an example of when she worked in corporate with a major company here in Atlanta. And someone was giving her career coaching advice and said to her, you know, if you really want to move up here, you may want to consider relaxing your hair, because she was wearing her hair natural.
Wow.
And someone in the room raised their hand and asked her, so what did you do? And she quietly looked at them and said, I relaxed my hair.
Wow.
And so, you know, that's part of that punishing culture, in that if the perception within organizations through their culture is that these are the things, these are the behaviors, these are the ways in which you need to behave and act in order to have a successful career here. And those messages challenge who you are from an identity standpoint. That gets extremely complicated and punishing.
Yeah.
Now, Tim, just Tim, just to let you off the hook on that. Right now at Harvard, there's a course, Anthropology 1679, that focuses entirely on punishment culture. So,
thank you, Tim.
Well,
I don't know Kennedy
I
and
didn't
Kenny.
know that. I didn't even know that. I thought I was making that up. So, you know, that's
isn't that great? Well,
and it's another anthropologist, so that's why.
For my entire life, I've believed that I created the word humongous. So there you go. I thought I created that word. So yeah, back to 2017, our culture of punishment, the quick fix to all of society's woes. We are a society that loves punishment. After all, it's our own way of maintaining order in our lives. Yeah, it goes on and on. But anyway, there you go. So you're safe in that regard. Now, just going back to Brian's original question, I love it that I arrive with a certain program in mind. Off we go. I love it, love it, love it. Let's talk about some of these other things. So energizers kind of get sucked into some cause. So they tend to glom onto anything that's closely related. But what about these people over here? What if I said to you, what would happen to this movement if these people were never involved? So what would happen to all this outgrid intention and execution if there was none of this energy around?
The change wouldn't happen.
The change
would be stagnant.
Right. And so every movement needs to also find people who can do the administrative sorts of things, who can be followers, which to me are people that just are happy to do whatever in the moment. And, you know, they're not going to do complex things, but they're happy to take care of anything they can take care of. And if they want to like kind of take the bull by the horns a little bit, maybe they move up to being more of a helper, take on a little bit more of a challenge. So maybe they become like a bit of a volunteer team leader in you know, the soup kitchen or wherever they happen to be. And then you always have the people that are now up here because they know all they can really bring to it is enthusiasm. So, you know, I know we got to do something. I'm worried about whatever, you know, they've got all that stress energy around it. And so I really think that these people over here on the right side can keep pushing and preaching and putting forth a case and on and on and on. But if they can't get this other part of the team working, it's all for nothing. It's a lot of noise with no real.
Are we there now? It seems like that there's so much what's the word, extremism, like you're either part of this or you're not, and if you're not, then you're other, and it just seems like too easy to get to this point of otherism at this stage in humanity that I'm seeing.
Right. So let me give you a kind of an example of that from a business perspective. How do you guys think that a motorcycle club like the Hells Angels became worldwide? So was it that it started, I think it started in the US, I really don't know, but that the US started going like, well, let's expand, let's expand, let's expand. Or were there somewhat related mini movements starting elsewhere who learned about what the Hells Angels were all about and reached out to see if there's some way they could be absorbed into Hells Angels, or, you know, work together, whatever. How did that become? And you guys know that's a culture. So, you know, they're talking, if you want to have some fun, just Google the rules that members of the Hells Angels have to obey. You're kind of going like, oh no, this is a real organization with, oh yeah, you don't want to mess with that. And so I'm always wondering about that. So was that there was an energizer group elsewhere, and when they saw that this other group that seemed to have more presence, more of their act together was there, they glommed on? to whatever was going on and ultimately got pulled in. Thoughts about that? Kathy, you just unmuted.
Yeah, no, I think that's generally how it happens with these types of things. It's very rare that I mean, oftentimes there is a global strategy that comes from a center, a place to go out and reach out and create other cultures, but that doesn't work very well. I mean, United States corporations have been trying to do that for, over 100 years now. What generally happens is that there are like-minded people that spring up around the world, and depending on the opportunity is there for someone who has the greatest level of organization and the biggest tent, then allows other people in and connects. And I think that's generally been the trend on how this type of thing happened. I don't know how it happened with the Hells Angels, but I do know that
I don't either.
More frequent that it would happen that way, that it's a big world and there are people who have like-minded thinking and they come together in that way.
They come together, and then I go back to my question: are they coming because they want to integrate? Because they're willing to abbreviate, because they're willing to assimilate? I got to believe that if some other group wanted to become part of the Hells Angels family, Hells Angels is going to say everything we do is very tightly established, and so you will have to assimilate into what's going on, where when I think about the structure of Christianity or religions inside of Christianity, I go like, okay, well, Catholicism seems to be Catholicism, and I know there are some little variations in it, but when you think about Christianity, there are so many different faiths, I guess, that are a subset of Christianity. So I got to believe Baptists are different than Methodists, or they would have gotten together long ago. So, there's these distinctions that are in there, yet they've all wanted to be part of this more umbrella sort of Christian culture that now is has these subcultures underneath it.
Well, I mean, let me just comment here. I think it might shift around. I mean, people become part of or identify with that larger organization or concept if they benefit from it. Is there a reason to affiliate at that higher level? Otherwise, they can maintain their own group.
Yeah, right.
There's a reason why they can't, but is there a benefit? Do they get something out of it materially or, whatever, some kind of benefit? And that's what allows them to affiliate. And they may only affiliate partially or affiliate in short term or, whatever. But I think it's about, is there a benefit?
I like that you just said affiliate. You've been a real source of words today. That's excellent. Because I go like affiliate would come before integrate, because affiliate says we'd like to be in some sort of association with you, but we want to remain distinct. So
yeah, and I think about that because I went to a lot of Jesuit affiliated schools, and they, from what I understand about them, I'm more of the atheist side of things, although my family is not. But from what I understand, Jesuits, in terms of Catholicism, they're the highest order. Like they started on this idea of assimilating, but then they had other versions or ideas or whatever you want to call it about Catholicism that they've taken on. And so they're Jesuit principles, but that's what I was always told, like they're the highest order of Catholicism.
Well, and then you look even deeper in that and say that inside there's going to be certain conservative leaning groups and certain liberal leaning groups. And I'm not talking about politically, I'm talking about the way that organization evolves. So it may very well be that inside of the Catholic Church, if you want to say who is most interested in keeping things as they always have been, who is more interested in conserving what is already in place. I don't know what order resonates more with that, but I would imagine that inside of every order, there is some individual who is going to be more conservative, as opposed to, the other extreme would be someone who wants to encourage evolution in whatever the organization happens to be. So, adapt to the new cultures instead of making the cultures conform to what's going on. So anyway, yeah. So now going back to this idea about what the benefit is, I love Kathy brought that up as well. The benefit, I think that at a certain point in time, the benefit has to be that all of these roles that are on the more in-grid side of things are in place and functioning well. Because I might energetic, if I'm an energizer and I'm upgrid, whatever, I may very well see whoever this influencer is as being my life ring. Remember that if I'm way up there in stress, I'm feeling totally out of control, I'm looking for someone to rescue me. I'm looking for someone to jump to my aid. Well, if an influencer appears on the scene and goes, hey, we can help you, I can certainly see energetically how I would end up being, moving over in that particular direction. But being moved into a way of thinking and being able to become a functioning member of that organization or that culture or whatever requires that these things are in place. Now, why am I bringing that up? Brian, you're the one who asked the question about how attention management applies to this whole thing. Any thoughts? Why do I need, I'll open it up to everybody. Why do you think we need these people on this side of things? And when do they kind of appear? Where do they come from? How did all this outgrid side of things ultimately give rise to some of this in-grid side of things?
I think that people migrate towards structure.
All right.
I mean, not always, but I think it is a human tendency to, if there is some kinship with either ideology or benefit or whatever, structure, it's easier to plug into, it takes less energy to plug into an existing structure. So on the left-hand side of the grid, you're going to see people who don't want to spend as much of their own energy, and are more likely to plug into something else that is being created or developed, which requires energy from the right side of the grid, from the outside of the grid. So there's that piece of it. I mean, I don't know. I'm not quite sure I understand.
Well,
did you restate that, T, or?
Yeah, well, let me just, where I was trying to go with this, or I was thinking about, is that I can certainly see how all the people that are on the in-grid side of things were somehow or another heard the message, influenced, felt the mission, whatever it happens to be. But they have to come to this organization with their own individual culture in mind. And maybe if in the culture they came from, and again, I'm defining culture as being that inside of each of us, we are members of, I'll say countless cultures, but yeah, a bunch of different cultures. Maybe if in the other cultures I'm part of, I've been conditioned to be a follower or an administrator or a helper, that resonates with the culture I'm already comfortable with. And so I move myself into these particular roles, whether I do it intentionally or just by happenstance. I'm going to migrate. I think that's Kathy's kind of point, is that we're going to migrate to whatever part of that organization that matches the culture that lives within inside of the individual. Does that resonate? Anybody? Oh, David, you're right there. Welcome.
That makes sense, actually. At least as I'm thinking about my own experience, there was a certain, I guess the word is conditioning, that I was comfortable with and integrating with other cultures, or even interacting with other cultures. I'm thinking like first place I lived was in Kenya. In Kenya, I was Mzungu, which is the Swahili word for outsider. So I'm there thinking, you're a young lad, and kids can be mean to each other. And I'm Mzungu to other Blacks, I'm Mzungu to whites, I'm Mzungu to Indians. So I'm like, where do I fit? Yep. I'm Mzungu.
Yep.
So I had to figure that out. But I think the saving grace for me is I've always been the kind of person, I can go into any group and come out with 2 or 3 friends. My mom was the one that would cap that, because they're thinking, what do we know about their family?
Yeah, right.
But I bring them home and say, can we feed them? That was my way of, everyone kind of congregates around food.
Right, because that was part of your family culture. And but I had a question: the people that would identify as you said Mzungu?
Mzungu, yes.
None of them are identical to one another, right? No, they just don't fit in. So anyone who doesn't fit in has this label. outsider.
Exactly.
It's the version of outsider. Yeah. Okay. And so, I just wanted to make sure that we finished the discussion around this idea. I do believe that movements or new cultures are come into be because someone had some sort of an idea. Someone had a thought, someone had some sort of an idea, and someone decided that idea needed to be explored, activated, pursued, whatever, and the leader turned it into a mission with a vision and determination and all those sorts of things, and then enlisted like-minded people. We all know that the power of the leader sits in the first follower. So someone had to become this follower who would help to support the message of the leader, perpetuate the message of the leader, etc. And then as the influencers, the leaders started to meet more and more people, talking about what the movement needed, what the culture needs, what the culture is all about, people probably started saying, well, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I fit in here, I fit in there, I fit in whatever. But it's also possible that the power of these individuals forced you into one of these roles, basically expected you to abbreviate or remove, subordinate somehow the influencer that lives inside of each of us, or the leader that lives inside of each of us, the advocator. This whole discussion about roles, when we're using the change, we're saying like this is more of an energy that we're moving into or out of. We are all of these things. We all have a full change grid available to us at all times. Well, what if people have been subjected to such leader energy in the past that the only thing they are comfortable being is a follower because they've been suppressed or whatever? Or the influencer has kind of done the opposite. The opposite of an influencer is an administrator, an energizer is a thinker. And so maybe some of these more outward energies, basically, I want to say molded, subordinated, yeah, these in-grid and down-grid energies. Thoughts about that? Oh, what Tim right here. Barry proposed a model of acculturation that categorizes individual adaptation strategies along 2 dimensions. The moment someone says 2 dimensions, I'm thinking about this overlay of the change grid. So the first dimension concerns the retention or rejection of an individual's native culture. Okay, so that would kind of like be degree of match. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Overlap over whatever we say. And the second dimension concerns the adoption or rejection of the host culture. This gives rise, then, is this what this says, Tim? Barry's model gives rise to, there's a place in the change where you're going to be all about assimilation, separation, integration, and marginalization. Is that what this says?
Yeah, he's saying from those 2 questions, those are the strategies that emerge: assimilation, separation, integration, and marginalization.
All right, all y'all take a screenshot of what Tim sent over there, because
I'll drop the link in. I'll drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, because I want to know, do they already have a diagram?
They actually do.
Well, then.
Okay.
Don't you guys love it? This is what the merging of brilliance is really all about. It's not too often. Maricopa, of all places.
Yeah.
Well, we're in Maricopa County. Well, we're in Maricopa County, and so Maricopa community colleges are the colleges of the valley, unless there's another Maricopa somewhere. Assimilation, separation, here we go. So value and maintain native culture, yes or no? And obviously we believe they should be more on a scale. So yeah. All right. Guess what we're talking about on Thursday? Go ahead, Gus.
T, the whole thing, when you said, did I fit in, when you said you were an atheist, what is the whole thing of fitting in? Do we have to be a society of clones, a culture that is defined by, we all have to think alike? And then you look at countercultures and then they become all alike, the hippies,
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're just a new culture giving rise.
Yeah, and so doesn't it all come back? I think it's a personal insecurity that, you know what, if we all think alike, I gotta be right. And So I like to look at everything as total freedom and personal independence, rather than being dependent on having all these people think like me, whether it's Christian or this. Yeah, and so I'd like to look at it from another aspect. I really would.
That's very Aristotelian of you, in fact. And so I think that now harkens back to what Kathy said, that in order for that there is a part, Kathy, you'll need to repeat it for everybody, because I know I'm just going to butcher it, but that humans have a need to belong. There is a driving force within us about belonging. And in order for us to belong anywhere, we're going to have to either, by luck, match the culture. Otherwise, we're going to have to integrate, abbreviate, assimilate, whatever the 8 is. We're going to have to do that. Kathy, did I say that correctly? You can.
Well, almost, but.
Thank you. Please fix it.
Well, I mean, there's react, there's a whole range of continuum, but there's a continuum there. But as you move up the continuum, it's assimilate is before integrate. So there's an acceptance, then there's an assimilation, then there's integration. But before that, there's reaction, and sometimes rejection. So there's a whole process that you go through. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, then let me throw this into the mix as a little closing thought for you guys. What Kathy has just alluded to there has a lot to do with intensity. So is it possible that these 4 movements that someone might make, assuming we can, usually if we're going to overlay something on the change grid and it happens to appear to be a static model, we're going to add a dynamic possibility to that model's presence in there. So is it possible that these 4 things could live very close to the heart line or very close to the PowerPoint? Or does it live in a more intense range where it's kind of further out grid? Or does it cover the whole thing? Is there a place where assimilation, separation, integration, marginalization are all serving us well, but at an extreme, each of them becomes problematic? It'll be fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of tension matters, as you well, I mean, it matters to the individual, it matters to the group, it matters to the overall success, of the culture, so yeah, I would agree with that. In general, I would agree with that.
Well, let's plan.
I think the word that Kathy used earlier that resonates with me is navigate, and be able to navigate. Because I'm still trying to navigate the U.S. culture, and I've been here for quite a while, but
so are we.
Yeah, Brian, it constantly changes like the weather in Michigan.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're always getting exposed to new cultures. I mean, you guys recognize that how long ago did the whole world of social media begin? It's not 20 years old, right? Or it was in its infancy 20 years ago, am I right? I don't know.
Yeah, it hasn't been 20 years, I don't think.
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, but all I know is that it is a relatively new kid on the block, a new culture that has been, that has evolved, developed, but somebody initiated the whole thing and we kind of moved in the direction of that one. Well, who knows what the next one's going to be. So resilience is the name of the game. And my only concern, it goes back to when we're working with our individual clients, this whole idea about someone feeling the need to abbreviate who they are and how they are, I think merits exploration at the individual level. Because are they abbreviating out of a fear that really isn't grounded in the reality of the situation? Is it a matter of courage? I think about kids coming out. Well, for how long did they abbreviate their truth before finally coming out? and how are they then, encouraged, supported, judged? What happened to their enrollment in other cultures when they shared this particular part of themselves? Yeah. Anyway, there you go. Something to think about. All right. Any final thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you for this
Thank you.
exploration.
Yes, someday we'll get back to talking about these last few blocks we haven't really dove into. But I love the conversation about culture and how it evolves. So thank you for that, Brian. We appreciate it very much. All right, thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good week,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.